Hello, can you hear me? Excellent. So we've all been in Milan, so I think we've got a bit of the Italian bug and we're starting late. I'm sorry. Although the ring did start on time, which is amazing. Thanks for coming. It's a different. I haven't been in this venue before, which is it's interesting. Quite big though. Anyway, today is actually very important because I think it marks for me, I think it marks the future. The flagships companies have kind of left the stage when it comes to Wagner, in this country at least. And that's given the opportunity to smaller forces. I mean, Melbourne Opera have been doing Wagner consistently for a long time, but now it's open to smaller companies like Shaumet Music and BK Opera in Melbourne, who are doing a cut down Tristan and Isolde later this year. So it's opened up the environment for those small companies to do Wagner and keep the dream alive. So it's important for the society to support these opportunities, not only with telling us what they're doing, but also with some money and hopefully with a lot of ticket sales. I've got my tickets, so make sure that you get your tickets as well. What else? I think, opera is in trouble around the world. I mean, yes, some of us have just come back from Europe and seen a ring cycle at La Scala and everything seems hunky-dory, but it's not. Even La Scala has got problems. You've heard about the Met with their financial problems. Germany is also, government is cutting back on money towards the arts as other things become far more important to both attend to and fund. So it is something that needs to be a grounds up kind of, not reaction, but certainly resistance, that we shouldn't let these things go. So it's important to have someone like Toby Wong to come and talk to us about what Shaumet Music is doing with does Rheingold. So I'm not going to, you've read Toby's bio. We know Jill, she's a member and a friend of the society, and the accompanist Jamie Lee, who is part of the Shaumet Music family. So all the bios are in there. Please read, I'm not going to take any more time. And as I said, have lots of questions for Toby about this upcoming Rheingold, and just support it. So thank you for being here. Toby.
Thank you very much, Esteban. Yes, first of all, thank you very much for having me and for this invitation. It's actually really a pleasure to be here to talk to you all about this amazing and exciting project coming on. So on the 24th of April, Shaumet Music and I will be presenting this Das Rheingold, Dove and Vick version in the City Recital Hall. That's why I'm also here to introduce you this very special arrangement, because that will be a historical moment in Sydney. That's the Australian premiere of this version, and actually this version has not been performed in a lot of places, and the score that we are holding at the moment is actually the only full score or hard copy score that was actually performed elsewhere in Europe previously. So it's actually a very, very valuable project for all of us, not only as performers, but I think as audience members as well. Great, so today I'm not only to introduce the work itself and the arrangement, but also would like to share a bit of the journey behind getting it to the stage, because as it turns out, that journey is very much part of understanding of what this version actually is. And I've known about this arrangement for quite a few years now, and I think like many young conductors, I was immediately drawn to it, not just because it makes Wagner more practical with a smaller scale production, but because it raises a really interesting question. What actually happens when you take something as large scale and as structurally complex as Rheingold and compress it? And that question stayed with me for a very long time, but it remained just an idea until around mid-2024, when I started talking with a producer here in Sydney, Alita Shang, who runs Shaumet Music, the organization of Rheingold performance, this Rheingold performance, and she has also been involved in a lot of opera gala work at the Opera House, in galleries, and in various other venues. And she was very keen to move into producing larger productions, such as an opera production. So at that point, the conversation became quite simpler. Like, if we are going to do something, what should that be? And somehow we landed on Wagner's Rheingold. Now, choosing Rheingold is one thing, actually getting hold of this particular version, the Dove and Vick version, is another. Now, so the first thing we did was to contact, of course, the Birmingham Opera Company, which actually has the score, the only score, the hard copy, and the rights of performing the score in the world. So, and Graham Vick, who was part of the arranger, arranging process of this work, is actually, he was part of the company as well previously. And so this was the second half of 2024. I sent an email, nothing happened. I follow up, also nothing happened. And at that point, it started to feel slightly ironic, because like almost as if the score itself was hidden away somewhere and we were just not, we just weren't meant to get it. So I tried another route. In early 2025, I decided to contact Jonathan Dove, which is the arranger of this score as well, and his publisher also. No response. And at this stage, it was it started feeling like a joke now, like, oh, okay, we have this idea, but how are we going to get this score then? Because we didn't want to do the whole Rheingold for more than 2.5 hours, and we can't pay more than 120 musicians to do this thing. So we need to get that chamber-sized arrangement. And then suddenly, in February 2025, I finally heard back from the Birmingham Opera Company. The reply came from Seb Lovell-Huckle, who had just taken over as director after a change in leadership of that company. So there were apologies, explanations, and most importantly, they were willing to help. So finally something has started. And once that connection was made, things started to move very quickly. I immediately got in touch with the City Recital Hall here in Sydney, and we were able to secure a date for April 2026, which already felt like a huge step forward, because suddenly it was not an idea anymore, there was a timeline. And now, before the score even arrived, I received a kind of warning. The message was from Birmingham and was very essential. In the email, are you absolutely sure you want to do this? ? And not in an artistic sense, because it's actually a very practical question. They told us the score is, in their words, quite messy. It's all handwritten. The vocal lines are literally cut and pasted into the handwritten full score. So bar numbers were not always consistent. The orchestral parts were also handwritten, and there are discrepancies between them. And perhaps most importantly, there are like small minor mistakes throughout the whole score, like things they don't quite add up, passages where you have to make a decision rather than simply follow what's written on the page, and I will share more about that later on. But anyways, in other words, they were trying to tell us you have to experiment that, but not just following what's written on the paper. But I think the word experiment is a very good word to summarize the whole project, actually. And because what they were really saying was it's not a fixed, polished, and canonical text in the way we might expect from Wagner. It's something more fluid, something that requires reconstruction, interpretation, and at times a bit of courage to do the whole thing. So of course, I answered, yes, we would like to do this, and we need to do this, because we have already booked the venue anyways, so we have to do this. The score eventually arrived in May 2025, and that was the first moment when the project became fully real. And we held auditions in September 2025, and rehearsals have been underway since November. And from the very beginning, that idea of experiment has been central, not just in dealing with the material, but in thinking about what this version of Rheingold actually is and what it can become in performance. And that brings me to the arrangement itself, because before we can talk about how it works before we talk about how it works in practice, we need to understand where it comes from and what it is trying to do. So, before we get into instrumentation and more technical aspects of the work, I would like to take a step back and briefly introduce what this dove arrangement actually is, and perhaps more importantly, how we might approach it. Well, the work itself is an experiment. The way I have been studying it is an experiment. The way we are performing it will be an experiment. And I would also suggest, if you are coming to the performance, and I really encourage you to come, the way you experience it as an audience member is also an experiment. This version comes from what was originally called the Ring Saga, created in 1990 by Vick and Jonathan Dove for the Birmingham Opera Company. It is essentially an abridged version of the entire Ring cycle, reimagined for very small forces, only 12 singers and 18 orchestral players, with a total duration of around 10 hours for all the 4 operas, designed to be performed across 2 evenings instead of 4. And importantly, it was not conceived for traditional opera houses. The premiere took place not in a grand theatre, but in a leisure centre in Birmingham. And the production toured sports halls and community venues across the country. And I think the most famous performance of this work, it was actually done by the Berlin Deutsche Oper in a car park. And there is a famous review of this project by Rupert Christiansen, and who wrote, "Some of the mightiest sounds ever imagined by the mind of man communicate every bit as awesomely as they might at Bayreuth or Covent Garden. It is, as I said, a miracle." So that idea of a pocket-sized miracle is quite telling. And because what Vick was trying to do with the Birmingham Opera Company was not simply to reduce Richard Wagner, but to rethink how opera functions, his productions were often described as experimental, sometimes even confrontational, and very deliberately aimed at making opera accessible, performing in English, using non-traditional venues, and often involving local communities. And although this version has been performed in English or and in German, we are going to do it in German next month here in Sydney. And musically, this is where Jonathan Dove comes in. At that time, this arrangement was actually one of his earlier major projects. Before becoming widely known for his choral and operatic works, Dove was deeply involved in opera as a repetiteur, arranger, and collaborator. He understood very well the practical mechanics of opera productions, and he had already created chamber orchestrations for works like Janacek's The Cunning Little Vixen, Verdi's Falstaff, and also Rossini's Cinderella. But this, reducing the entire Ring cycle to 18 players, was by far the most ambitious. Now, if we focus briefly on Das Rheingold itself, in the original version, it runs about 2.5 hours. In this arrangement, it is reduced to roughly 1 hour and 50 minutes. So proportionally, actually, Rheingold is actually the least cut of the 4 operas. Now, I'll show you the other 3 operas here. Die Walküre, it will take 2 hours and 52 minutes in this version. Siegfried, even shorter, 2 hours and 12 minutes. And Götterdämmerung, almost half of it is cut, only 2 hours and 44 minutes. But even so, I think it is important to set expectations clearly. This is not the Rheingold that we know. In fact, I would go as far as to suggest that it is almost a newly rewritten work based on the Ring cycle. Rheingold perhaps still feels relatively close to Wagner because not a lot of things were actually cut. But as you move further into the cycle, the cuts and restructurings become more radical. So if one comes to this expecting the full Wagnerian orchestral sound, the brass weight, the string richness, every single leitmotif in its original form, then yes, it may feel like something is missing. But that is not really the point of performing this work then. As Graham Vick himself said about these productions, what we are doing is taxing, because there's no mystic gulf to hide behind when you are playing in a sports hall, but it can still be as dramatic as anything at Covent Garden. And I think that gets to the core of it. The aim is to preserve the drama, to keep the story moving, and to make the work function in a completely different environment. In fact, I once heard a Wagner director from Canada who said that Wagner's operas are not long, they are just very slow. That may not entirely apply to Rheingold, which is actually one of the most tightly structured in the whole Wagnerian repertoire. But in Dove's version, across the whole cycle, many of the extended dialogues are significantly shortened or reshaped. So what we are left with is something that is more direct, more compressed, and in some ways quite different in character. And for me, one of the most helpful ways to approach this score has been to treat it at most times almost as a new work or an independent work. Not a replacement for Wagner, but a reimagining of the Ring cycle. There are, of course, other adaptations of the Ring, for example, the famous orchestral arrangement by Lauren Massel, The Ring Without Words, which condenses the orchestral material without altering one single note. But in this Dove approach, it is fundamentally different. Authenticity is not the primary goal. Accessibility, practicality, and theatrical clarity, they are the main goals. So inevitably, there are cuts, compressions, and sometimes quite unusual transitions. And if we measure those directly against the original, they may feel a bit surprising or even unsettling. But again, that brings us back to the key idea. This is an experiment, not a direct comparison to Wagner's own work itself. And with that in mind, I would now like to show you a short video excerpt, not from Rheingold, but actually from the Valkyria of this Dove arrangement, just to give you a sense of what this world sounds and feels like. I'll let you form your own impressions or opinions, but perhaps listen for how material is compressed and restructured. I'm going to play you the end of Act 1 and how the musical transition was composed into Act 2. Part of the Act 2 interlude was played there, but not the whole thing. So you can expect something like this also happening in our Rheingold performance. So something like this for your own judgment or impressions. Great. Now, also, I would like to stress the sound of the orchestra actually still sounded fascinating just now because they actually doubled all the instruments. If you looked carefully, there were about 30 players, not really 18. So they cheated there. But in our production, we don't have that much money, so we only have 18 players. So very, very loyal to the score or to the arranger. Great. So let's now move on to something else. Let's talk about the roles, the instrumentation, and how I prepared the score. If we look at the cast list in this version of Das Rheingold, the Dove arrangement, we have Wotan, we have Albrich, we have Loga, we have Fricka, Donna, Freya, Eda, Fasold, Fafner, the giants are there, and also 3 Rhine maidens, Woglinda, Velgunda, and Flosshilda. Now, if you know the original well, you might notice there are 2 roles missing. Who are they? We don't have Fro, and we don't have Bima. That's great. Yes, the first one, the missing one, is Fro. Jonathan Dove essentially treats Fro, unfortunately, as somewhat redundant. Almost a doubling of Donna, sorry tenors. And one of our directors, Barry Ryan, was so disappointed about this, actually, as he sang Fro with Riccardo Muti in La Scala some years ago. So instead of keeping a separate role in this Dove version, Fro's lines will still be there, although largely trimmed or redistributed, mainly to Donna and occasionally to Loga, Interestingly, though, Froh is not entirely erased. Freya still calls out to him in the text, so he exists, but only as a kind of invisible presence. And actually, Wagner did that in Götterdämmerung. You know which role? Lorga was there when in the immolation scene when Brunhilde was calling the fires. Actually, she also called Lorga's name. So it's actually, I'm not sure if these two scenery connects with each other, but maybe Jonathan Dove was actually thinking about that as well when he was doing the arrangement, but we have to fact check with him, I'm not sure. And now, the second missing role is Mima. Here, the cut is much more radical. The entire opening of scene 3 is removed in this Dove arrangement. Dove's view seems to be while that scene creates a vivid image of the Nibelheim, it does not serve the central dramatic trajectory strongly enough. So Mima disappears completely along with that section. So we almost will lose half of scene 3 in Rheingold in this Dove arrangement. Now, of course, we lose something, but other things are preserved very carefully. For example, Lorga's central monologue in scene 2, what some might even call his aria, remains largely intact. And the role of Erda is preserved in full. In fact, she is probably the only character whose material is kept 100%. And I suppose if you only have about 4 minutes of music to sing, you really don't want to be cut down to 2, right, Jill? Yes. In fact, I'm very happy Jill is here today, our Erda, who will be performing the Erda excerpt together with our repetiteur Jamie Lee today, later on after the talk. And Wotan, on the other hand, suffers a bit more. Quite a number of his lines are cut, including, rather unfortunately, the Abendlich in scene 4 is cut, which is really his only aria-like moment in Rheingold. Dramatically, one can understand why it is removed. It functions as a reflective pause, but musically, it is certainly a loss. Our Wotan, Shane Lawrenchev, actually wrote to me before accepting the role, asking, "Why was that cut?" ? And unfortunately, under our agreement with the Birmingham Opera Company, we are not allowed to alter Dove's version. So I had to promise him that if we ever do Die Walküre next year, if we have enough resources, he will have much more to sing. As a result, the dramatic weight shifts somewhat, particularly towards Albrecht. His major moments, the opening of scene 4, the Curse of the Ring, are all preserved. And they became structurally even more central to the work. I was almost convinced to bring our Albrecht, Simon Lobelson, here today to sing for us, but I suppose it's also good for both myself and the production to hold something back, so you will still come on the 24th of April to City Recital Hall. Now, turning briefly to the orchestra. The scoring, of course, is for 18 players, although a lot of past productions of this particular Dove arrangement, they cheated, like the recording we have just heard. They found more players to double all the instruments, but in our version, it's actually only 18 players. And you can see we have a very unusual string combination here. We have 2 violins, we have a viola, who also has to play violin sometimes. So we call it violin 3 or viola 1 here. And it will be only one person playing both instruments, which is also a bit of a hard find for me to get great violinists and also violists in one person. And we also have cello 1, cello 2, and double bass. So we have actually 3 bass instruments on the string lineup here. Now, woodwinds are quite thin. We have flute and piccolo, that's almost very normal to double these 2 instruments, oboe and English horn together, and then this is a very tricky one. We have clarinet in B flat, bass clarinet, and also that person has to play tenor saxophone. Well, the only similarity of these 3 instruments, it's that they are just single reed, but that doesn't mean that a clarinet B-flat player can always play a tenor saxophone, and vice versa. And even, it was hard for me to find a clarinetist in Sydney who can actually play the bass clarinet, because actually a lot of clarinetists they have told me it's actually they are very different instruments. So it's very hard to find one person who can actually excel in both instruments here. Now, of course, we also have the bassoon in the bass part. Now, brass. If you are a Wagnerian horn fan, you might be a bit disappointed. Here we have horn 1, horn 2, we have trumpet and flugelhorn, trombone, and the tuba, which is also a very interesting part because you look at the screen there. This person has to double with the bass trumpet. I'm not sure what a bass trumpet is actually. I've looked online on Google to look at the picture of this instrument. It's actually just a longer trumpet, but it's actually a very rare instrument. And unfortunately, I've asked more than 10 tuba players in Sydney. No one actually knows how to play bass trumpet. And that's the other thing. I'm going to, yes, that's the other thing I'll share with you later about this instrument as well. But apart from that, we also have percussion. Our percussionist here, he has to play triangles, timpanis, tam-tams, cymbals, all by his own 2 hands here. And we have a harp. Instead of 6 harps, we have 1 harp here. And also, in this very special arrangement, we have the organ, which is, of course, a very new thing in the ring cycle. And I have been improvising a bit, so I've lost. Yes, so Dove includes the organ, but don't expect it's actually an organ symphony or an organ concerto. The organ here actually functions to fill in the gaps of the harmony because, well, in a usual Wagnerian orchestral setting, you have more than 100 players, so a lot of harmonies are missing. The organ functions in this way, so it's secretly merging into other instruments' voices, and those harmonies are quite settled when the organ is playing. So this is the orchestra, 18 players. Yes, so how are we going to deal with the absence of the bass trumpet then? I had no clue until I flipped over all of the orchestral part scores, and there's a small, tiny writing under the trombone score. If there is no bass trumpet, trombone can play the bass trumpet part. So everything is solved. The trombone player can do some transpositional works in his brain, and then we have the bass trumpet part played on the trombone. So that's the solution. Great, now, this is the orchestra, and then let's talk about my point of view, the conductor's point of view, or the score. Well, the score, of course, is not a fixed text. Even now, the materials contain pencil markings, inconsistencies, and alternative passages. In rehearsals, we often have to decide what to play and what not to play. At the very end, the Rainbow Bridge excerpt, there are even 2 written trombone versions in the part score, so we had to decide which part that only trombonist had to play or has to play in the performance, which we are still experimenting because both parts, I think, are quite essential, but we don't have 2 trombonists, so we will decide what's going on with the singers later on. There are moments where the harp suddenly has to run over and play the percussion part as well. And at one point we realized the very important anvils in between scene 2 and 3, they are missing from the percussion part. They are also missing from my full score, but actually they are in the vocal score. That might mean that the singers have to play the anvils, and I'm still negotiating with some of them. Some of them are very excited, some of them are very worried about that. We'll see what happens. But what makes this even more fascinating is that Jonathan Dove is, in a sense, still editing the piece. Minor changes have continued over time, and as a result, no 2 productions are exactly the same. That's why there are a lot of pencil markings, there are extra bars, there are missing bars, and I have to decide which bars we have to play or we have to cut. I've been listening to and watching excerpts from previous performances, different companies, different countries, and they are all slightly different. The version we are performing in Sydney is in fact not identical to any of them. Even within our own materials, there are discrepancies everywhere. For example, right after Ada disappears, there is a passage in my full score. I'll show you here. Yes, here. Labeled with additional bars. Oh, it's actually not very clear, but can you see my pointer here? Yeah, so on your left-hand side, I suppose. You can see the extra bars here, which is indicated 597A, 597B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, etc. And the funny thing is, on the instrumentalist scores, some of them have A, C, D, E, some of them have H, I, K, whatever combination there is, and all of them are different, and of course different to my full score as well. So we have to sit down to discuss actually which bars we need, or which bars are actually there in my full score and in the vocal score and in their score. Because Jonathan Dove has been still editing at this point in different performances. That's why we still have to experiment what has to be cut or what should be there in the performance. And if you look at the cello part, oh yes, this is a much clearer photo. You can see A, B, C, D, E, F, G, those weird bar numbers, I guess. And then here's the cello part, yes. So some bars here are written like, oh, you have to play 3 more times of this bar, and then suddenly you have a fermata here. But other parts, they don't have that. So whether that person has to play 3 more times of that bar, we have to figure out what we are going to do. And also, here you can see, this bar has been crossed out. But also there's a pencil marking there, play. So should we play, or should we cancel that out? We are not sure yet. We have to compare different scores as well. And of course, you can see here, there's an extra bar line here. That's why I think a previous cello player has marked a question mark here as well. So is that a bar or is that not a bar? Excuse me, I have to drink. I have to get 1 sip of the water. Okay. And perhaps my favorite example of showing how confusing the score is, some theory test for you all. So the very, very ending of the opera, the very end, what chord is that, or what major, or what tonality are we settling in at the very, very last chord in Rheingold? It's a D-flat major chord, D-flat major after the Rainbow Bridge scene. So of course, we only have 3 notes, right? D-flat, F, and A-flat. Let's guess what we have on the cello score. We have an E-flat. And also a very, very small marking of the D-flat here, corrected by the previous cello player, I guess. So yes, these are all the very tiny but confusing moments that we are facing in rehearsals in this very confusing score. But also, I found it very, very fun to actually find out some clues or do the puzzle by myself to make this thing, to make all of these things happening in the performance. Okay. Yes. Let's move on then. Now, I would like to show you another video. Perhaps this time we'll look at some Rheingold excerpts, which I've mentioned that we might ask some singers to play the anvils, and I'll show you the transition between scene 2 and scene 3 of Rheingold. Scene 3 has been cut in this version. If you know, that's the mima part. That's why the whole row is not there in this particular version. And also, before actually talking about the scenes, I've talked a few things about the tenor saxophone. I think that's why Jonathan Dove was hoping to use this instrument as a bridge, to bridge the sonority between the Wagnerian horns and the horns. This creates a very, very interesting sound effect in my rehearsals, because a tenor saxophone, of course, is not a Wagnerian horn, but it somehow works. So if you really want to listen to how that works, it's actually very worth coming to just listen to that tenor saxophone sonority and how it matches with all the other brass instruments in some of those wonderful brass chorale sections in the work. For example, before the start of scene 2, and also in the Rainbow Bridge section when all the brass players play together at that point. Now, to the dramatic structure of the work, It might be helpful to briefly talk about how this version of Das Rheingold is actually structured, because although the overall the narrative remains intact, the internal pacing and emphasis are quite different. In scene 1, things are actually relatively faithful to the original. The famous E-flat major prelude is much shorter. Much shorter, I mean, from 4 minutes, it was cut into 40 seconds, but still establishes the same sense of emergence. The interactions between the Rhine maidens and Alberich are also compressed, less teasing scene and more direct dramatic moments in this version. Scene 2 is where we begin to see more noticeable interventions. The roles of Donna and Flor are effectively consolidated, which simplifies the texture among the gods. At the same time, Wotan's longer philosophical exchanges with Fricka are tightened. The focus shifts away from abstract ideas of power and law and more towards the immediate dramatic situation, the arrival of the giants and the problem of Freya. In scene 3, the changes are more radical. We have just seen that. Mima disappears entirely, along with the whole subplot of the Nibelung's internal world. What remains is a much more concentrated depiction of Alberich's transformation. And also, scene 3 is quite short, and it's the shortest actually in this arrangement. Finally, in scene 4, even though it is the longest scene, the pacing becomes even more direct. The ransom scene is streamlined, Erda's appearance is kept, and Wotan's Abendlicht is removed. So there is no real moment of reflection before the final rainbow scene there. The Rainbow Bridge music is also shortened, and the Rhine Maiden's lament is more concise. So this is the overall structure of the dubbed version of Rheingold. Now, so finally, how are we going to do this in Sydney? Having worked in the Sydney community opera scene for several years now, I have had the privilege of discovering many remarkable young voices, singers who have immense talent but often lack opportunities to tackle large-scale works. And I find myself in a similar position, a young, enthusiastic conductor eager to explore bigger repertoire, yet needing the right platform or collaborators to make this possible. My aim has always been to create a space where both emerging and more experienced musicians could share the stage together, to make history together by presenting this Australian premiere of the Dove arrangement. To that end, I assembled an all-Australian cast, many of whom have never performed in a full professional Wagnerian production, and some have covered roles or performed excerpts, but for most, this is a first main stage experience of Wagner, an exciting and slightly intimidating challenge. So our cast includes Shane Lawrenchev as Wotan from Sydney, Simon Lobelson from Sydney as Alberich, Raphael Hudson from Sydney as Lorga, Livia Brash from Melbourne as Fricka, Bernard Leong Lok Man from Melbourne as well as Donna, Alita Shang, who is also the producer of the Shaumet music production, as Freya, Jill Sullivan today here with us as Era, Tristan and Twistle as Fasold, Charles Cole as Fafner, Camilla as Waglinda, Katrina Waters from Canberra actually as Valgunda, and then Angelique Todt from Sydney as Floshhilda. And our directors are Dr. Anka Ryan and Barry Ryan, with Jamie Lee as repetiteur as well. And professional orchestra musicians were drawn from the Australian Brandenburg Orchestra, who we have a very nice trumpet player who specializes in Baroque trumpet, but actually she's also an excellent player of the modern trumpet, so I have asked her to play in this in this production as well. And of course, we also have our percussionist, actually. Let me show you our rehearsal photos here. Yes, Steve, who plays the timpani there. He was one of the percussionists at the New York Met Opera who played the entire ring cycle with James Levine many years ago. And yes, so he's very willing to join this Sydney premiere of the Dove arrangement as well. We have principals from Sydney community orchestras, we have conservatorium students. Actually, the clarinetist who plays the clarinet, the bass clarinet, and the saxophone is a con student, so very impressive. And she bought herself a new bass clarinet just for this production, so wonderful. Yes. What's her name? Her name is Chelsea Fu. Yes. Production-wise, we wanted to experiment while keeping it achievable. Originally, I thought a purely concert version, as advertised actually, would be enough. It's already a challenge to manage even semi-staged Wagner with like 12 singers and 18 orchestral players, but our director Anka encouraged us to aim higher. So if you have bought your tickets, you are very lucky because now we are doing it semi-staged. If you haven't bought that yet, that might be an incentive for you to buy a ticket. Yes, question there. No, she's not singing, but she's directing, and she has been doing a wonderful job of teaching how, or not really teaching, encouraging all of us to bring this together, to showcase this specialized work. Yes, okay. Now we are doing it in the City Recital Hall, and of course, we want you to see the instruments as well. So we are not putting the orchestral players down under the pit. This idea might be a bit crazy, but we are going to put the orchestra on the left, or 1/3 of the stage, and the remaining 2/3 of the stage, it will be on the right-hand side, will be the acting and the singing there. So you can see the singers, you can also see the orchestra. It might not be very convenient for me because I'll be standing in the corner trying to cue the singers over there. Let's see how that happens, actually. I'm not sure yet. Yes. Yes, so we are also experimenting with projected visuals in place of conventional subtitles. That was a decision actually by Anka. She would actually like to encourage a lot of young opera singers or even students to come and to watch their first Wagner opera. And she told me that with her conservatorium experience, it's actually quite boring to have students reading all the subtitles of Wagner and translated as well on the screen. Of course, many Wagnerian experts here would like to see all the translations and also the text, but I think that has been printed in your brain, so that won't be any problems for us. The alternative, what we are doing is to try to show a new concept of presenting opera subtitles. We will have a screen in the City Recital Hall, and on the screen we will have pictures or visuals that will be our backdrop, because it's semi-staged or not really staged. We'll use colored pictures or visuals as our backdrops. But on top of those backgrounds, we will have actually scene descriptions changing every minute or every few minutes. Like, oh, now the Rhine maidens have appeared, they are playing together, now Albrecht is trying to steal the gold, now we are crossing the Rainbow Bridge, something like that. So no translations of the text, but actually depicting what's happening on the scene. It's actually a very, very nice and novel idea, I would say. I have never thought about that. That's the idea of Anka, so it's very impressive. Not sure will that work, we'll see on the day. Yeah, but I'm pretty positive about that, and I think that's actually a very nice new way to produce operas for experienced watchers and also for younger viewers as well. Now, this is by all measure an experiment in staging, in presenting the music, in interpreting reimagined score, and in bringing together a vibrant group of musicians and singers to create something bold. Yes, you could always experience Rheingold in Bayreuth, in Berlin, in London, in Milan, or even with the SSO here in Sydney. But what makes our production special is the courage, enthusiasm, and the collaborative energy of everyone on stage, and our commitment to making Wagner approachable without losing the drama and grandeur. And I would also like to thank the Wagner Society here to make this happen. The licensing cost of the score and the hiring fee is actually very high for this score. So thank you very much to the Wagner Society for making this happen, to sponsor us for that part of the score. So thank you very much. And the performance is in just over 3 weeks on 24th of April. It's the first night of the Anzac Day long weekend, so we should all be free on the first night of that long weekend. So and we warmly invite you to come and join us to witness this historical performance in Sydney and in Australia. So whether you are a die-hard Wagnerian, a curious first-timer, or even a self-proclaimed anti-Wagnerian, I'm not sure, there's something like someone like this will be here today, but this production offers something unexpected and exciting. We hope you'll come and experience it live, and please spread the word as well to friends and family, so hopefully we have a lot of audience members to witness this happening in Sydney. There is something in this production for everyone, from breathtaking orchestral moments to bold theatrical performances and the chance to witness this Australian premiere, of course, this dove arrangement happening here in this city. And I guess we now have a few minutes for some questions. Yes, please. At this point, I'm not sure yet. We haven't. Maybe Anka has more has a bigger answer for this question, but I haven't seen anything yet, from my point of view. But please don't expect we have like those Met operas, like projections with lightings anywhere. I think we hope to keep everything very simple. So everything on stage will be the main focus, then all the visionaries, all the visuals there, because I think that's also not Jonathan Dove's idea of having fancy backgrounds and projections on stage, and to actually direct the focus of the main point elsewhere. But it will be something very different, but not those like traditional subtitles there, like in the opera house, you see that machine and then words, text, not like that. I'm not sure how we are going to do that yet. This will actually be my other meeting with her next week, so I'll find out more next week as well. I think we have more questions on this side first. Yes, please.
Thank you. I wonder, could you tell us who is Shaumet Music? I hadn't heard of them before.
Great question. I actually haven't heard of this production company as well before I met Alita. So Alita, she was about to come today, but I think she has something on as well, so she couldn't make it in time. It's actually, she has been producing different opera galas in Mossman Gallery and also Art Gallery, and also in the Utzon Room in Sydney Opera House, like smaller things. And it's still a very, very new company, I guess. That's why she would also like to make you try to do something bigger, and she contacted me, and I also suggested this Wagner production to her. So we are still building, and the aim is to not only do Rheingold. Hopefully in the future years we can have the right resources and also enough resources to bring the other three arrangements to Sydney. So this is actually a very, very new start for the company, for myself, for Alita, and for all the singers. And hopefully this can be continued as well. So more to come, hopefully.
We don't need it. A couple of very pragmatic questions.
Yes.
You said there's only one hard copy. Now, you've had it for some months. Does that basically mean there can only be about one production a year as the copy gets moved around?
That's a very good question, because I have been asking myself that question as well when I first received the score. I think yes. So basically, we didn't sign a contract that we have the exclusive right of performing this all over the world, but I think that's actually the case. I'm not sure if they have another hard copy in their office, but I don't think that's the case. They might have a scanned version, but to my knowledge, I don't think there's actually another company at this moment rehearsing or trying to produce this dove arrangement as well.
Thank
all over
you.
the world. Thanks.
One wonders, there are all sorts of volunteers around. They could probably get someone to type it up, someone musical, into one of the music programs. I don't know if that's been thought about, but that's not your problem at the moment. one other question. Obviously, you're doing this on a shoestring, but is there any plan to have even a still video made of it, i.e. just sort of one camera to film the whole production?
Oh yes, that's one of our aims. We hope to do that, but I'm not sure if we can circulate that around actually. That can be our archival recording, but on our agreement, because I think the Birmingham Opera still wants to make this a very special arrangement of their own company. That's why I think they marketed it as an only hard copy as well, so people will still approach to them to get the score under their license. So I think that's the marketing strategy of them. I'm not sure, but we will hopefully get some videos done. And although I think it might not be possible to circulate that around, it might be possible to show some of you, if you can't really come to the production, a few minutes of those videos later on. I think that will be possible. Yes, Jill? Yeah.
Purposes.
Yes.
That was going to be my question too, Jenny, that there are so many instances, even I've been saying that Australian opera should even, when there's significant cast changes and things like that are important in the world of what's going on, that there isn't a record of certain people having performed at certain times. Can't be so difficult to do a video by some friend or somebody like that who knows something about it.
Yes. Oh, yeah, the video thing will definitely make that happen. We have already talked to City Recital Hall that we have blocked some seats to do that. So we'll have some cameras on at the back, and yes. And as research purposes as well, I hope. This will be a very nice first-hand material for researchers.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I have a question, but
Yes.
I failed to mention that that Toby, apart from taking on all this work for this project, is about to embark on a PhD at the Con with friend of the society, Dr. David Larkin, on staging Wagner. Is that correct?
Yes. So that might be actually a useful material for me to embark on this
Yeah,
journey.
So
as well.
my question, Toby, is, my question is, how is this going to weave into your PhD?
That's actually a very good question. I actually haven't thought about that yet. It might be a potential chapter in my PhD that this particular version would be included as one of those new or novel arrangements of Wagnerian operas, because after COVID especially, well, even big companies, they are not doing Wagner anymore because it's too expensive. So there has been a new emergence of like new ways of producing or performing Wagner operas. One of them is to produce or perform reduced versions of it, and we are doing it. But that we'll see, because my aim is, I have more ambitious plans on my PhD. I would like to go to Germany and do something there. And because the New York Met is actually going to have a new production as well, I think coming up in 2028. If I get enough funding, I might go and interview some of them and look at how they produce the whole thing, the whole production. So I'm still thinking whether I'm focusing on smaller productions like these or bigger things in La Scala, in Bayreuth, or in New York Met. We'll see in a few months.
Toby, I'm interested in the detail and the amount of work that you are having to put in independently to this score. Mm-hmm. Often they arrive to a conductor and that work is complete, it's done. Mm-hmm. My question, and it's not being facetious, it's, are you going to send back a corrected version to the hirer?
Great question. I think they have to pay me if I produce something like that. But I have actually contacted them about this. I have been studying the score, and to be honest, before, because I have also other admin works to be done for this production, so I actually haven't studied the very last few pages of Scene 4 before I started the orchestral rehearsals last week. I did this in a very rushed period. And to my surprise, the pages were not there on the hard copy. Yes, why? Why were they not there? So I was very panicked. I immediately emailed the Birmingham Opera Company, oh, the pages were not there, why they were not there, and then of course, they did not reply me. Actually, I found out that I think it was a mistake by the previous hirer that they removed some of the pages and they inserted it into some of the orchestral part scores. So after like treasure hunts or other things that I've done for that night, I've found those pages and I relocated them. I didn't bring the scores here today because they are very messy, literally very messy, because it's only bind. They are like 500 pages, and it's separated into 2 booklets, so around 1,000 pages, and they are bind in a very, very unpractical way. So you can easily just you will lose a page if you don't take care of it. And I think that happened in the previous hirers, that's why pages were not there. And I emailed them, oh, so this is a very, very bad binding system. I promised them that I will bind the score again before sending back to them, and they replied me with that email like almost immediately within 10 minutes, so yes. But regarding the editing, I think I don't have time to do that, but hopefully that can be something that they can do for future hirers. And of course, I will send them back notes because, I have to mention this. They actually sent me a 2-page note, which includes all of the Jonathan Dove's new markings and also markings from the previous conductors that, we spot one mistake here, we spot another mistake there. I will be responsible to add something on the list, at least. So that might help future hirers of the score to make this better. Yes. Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry? Oh, you mean finding the suitable players? Oh, that has also been a very, very hard job. But I'm very lucky that I have the players that I have now. It's actually a very, very hard score to play, to be honest, and not a lot of Sydney players are willing to play a score like this. To be honest, this is like a concerto for everyone, a chamber orchestra concerto. If you look at the strings parts, it's actually harder than a Tchaikovsky violin concerto. Yeah, so I have, I can share this story. I was in Germany a few weeks ago, and we already had a concert master confirmed, which is a very brilliant, I'm not going to expose the name, but a very brilliant player at the conservatorium who can play everything, simply everything. But he has other engagements, and we are not actually, at this stage, we are still an emerging company, so we are not rich in resources, and that's why our fee might not match other professional organizations' fees, and we have to face this reality, of course. And that's why players have been coming and going, and the concert master has done the same thing to me just 5 days before the first rehearsal. But I was in Germany at that time, so huge time difference. I used 5 days to secure another new concert, not a concert master, she's a female violin player, so we have a principal to lead the ensemble, and she was willing to learn all the difficult score within 5 days, and she came to the first rehearsal, which was a great relief for me. So yes, so these are the situations that I've been facing, not only the violinist, these things have been happening on the woodwinds and in brass players, but I think it's also a very, very nice experience for myself. Like if I'm ambitious to do a big work like a Wagner opera, I also have the responsibility to look after the orchestra, to do all of these administration stuff. It's also a great thing for me to be done because I'm not sure if I'm having a wrong vision or something like that. But the first thing I was taught in university, or not really university, when I had my first conducting class, my teacher told me, this was back in Hong Kong, conducting the music is actually the easiest thing to do in the production or in the performance. The organization is the most difficult. If you are not as famous as Herbert von Karajan, you have to do the organizations by yourself. So that was my first conducting lesson, and I'm really, really valued that lesson as well, because I think it's actually happening to me now, but yes, I think these are all the things that we young conductors or young companies are facing, but at least we are trying, and I think hard work, like how much effort we pay to study or to do these admin work, they will reflect afterwards in the results. So it's also a celebration for us in the performance, and I hope you can also witness this happening in a few weeks.
I imagine Shaumet Music has a budget to put this one performance on, and are you hoping that it will pay for itself, and if not, what happens to the budget default? Does Shaumet Music have a pot of gold that it's going to... Yeah.
I think that's actually a question for all the opera companies in the world after COVID, but that's also a very brave question. Yes, that's why I'm also very, very pleased that I have been working with Alita. She actually has more positive vibes than me. She always tells me, oh, we can sell all the tickets. It will come. Although Sydney, we all know Sydney audiences are quite slow in buying tickets. Often myself as well, I always buy tickets last minute, like one day before the concert starts. So yeah, that's also my habit, so I understand that. Well, I think we just have to be to be honest, we just have to be positive at this stage. I'm very glad that Alita and the company has already paid the venue hiring fee, which is actually very expensive for the City Recital Hall. But the vision was, if we are putting on a Wagner premiere like this in Sydney, we have to do it in the proper way. That's why we like to find a proper hall, actually a world-class hall in Australia, to give our singers, our players, and myself as well, the opportunity to do this work in a proper way. That's our vision. The money thing we can talk later on after the performance. That's the reality we have to face later on. But now we just focus on to make this music happen and ask as much as our friends to come and support us. I think that's my attitude for the coming 3 weeks. Yes.
Can I ask, when you said it's semi-stage, does that mean that costumes will be involved?
Yes. But more than costumes in this case. Well, the original intention was to just hold the music and to sing in front of the orchestra, like what the SSO did in the concert version that they did. But Anka was mentioning, there's actually a lot of great drama involved in the work, so we have asked our singers to memorize the whole thing and then do some acting as well.
All right, if there's no more questions, I think we might go and have something to drink and eat. Toby, I'm very excited. I love the idea of experiment. Wagner was an experiment. Yes. Bayreuth is and remains, or was and remains an experiment. So, toi, 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 and I look forward to Rheingold and hopefully the rest of it in the future. So let's thank Toby once again.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much for having me again.